morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on our Tuesday roundtable. This is episode 67, and our special guest today is Greg Rosen. He is streaming live from Chicago, I believe. And my co-hosts, Carlo Parcelli in DC, Ben Toth in Page Hungary, Ian Cummer from a suburb in Moscow. And I'm Billy Bob. I'm from the West Coast. We have a lot to discuss today, starting with the title of our program. And this is kind of a small side note, but it's been in the news recently, this Havana syndrome. And you guys probably remember the Havana syndrome. It's been a manufactured psyop since about 2016. Trying to blame, all of U.S. enemies for this strange attack. But instead of me tripping over my words trying to explain it, who would like to trip over their words trying to explain it? Or I can, but anybody want to?
I mean, basically what it was, I don't know when it started, but you were helpful enough to send me the debunction of this. I knew it was years ago, but basically 2022, when all the intelligence officers, the White House, everybody said, no, we don't agree. This is mostly not a foreign actor, but it was like hangover syndromes, right? Big headaches, nausea, stuff like that. It was that.
Real general symptoms, real general, and like tinnitus, and I mean, it was just bullshit. But go ahead.
Suddenly, it's back in the news cycle, coming from Neocon Central Newsweek, which ran a couple of headlines. One of them, I don't know who the fuck that is, but I'm gonna check. Please carry on.
Okay, so while you're doing that, so I mean, the thing is, when certain, factions of the ruling class heavily invest in an ad campaign and they make sure they get these buzzwords into everybody's head, they're always able to later on to leverage those ad campaigns because they know they've already introduced it into the mass consciousness. So in 2016, they started, spamming the echo chamber with this story of Havana syndrome and how it's a special secret weapon, being targeted by the James Bond villains in Russia and, the usual suspects, Russia, Cuba, and how, they're attacking our government employees in embassies and things like that. But so you could go to the Wikipedia page. There was a big study by, I forget who the study was by, but it was reported by the State Department. And essentially of 1,993 or something like that, of the 1,000 cases were deemed to be not
attributed to foreign bad forces or something like that.
Yes. Shoot, and I should read it. I should read the verbatim. But yeah, I mean, essentially, it's been debunked. Like they debunked it themselves. It's been the people that have the biggest interest into promoting it and saying it's true themselves have debunked it back in 2022. And so the only reason they think they can bring it up again is because they know that Western citizens don't have any memory and they're very gullible and naive. And so it's back.
It's back. Yeah. It absolutely comes from the US, the news story. They call it a media investigation by like 2 or 3 groups, and there's it's just cringeworthy, and I hate that word, like interviews with guys like, obviously, you look at this and it's obviously Russia. And already Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House spokesperson, said, well, the intelligence does not correlate. We don't think this was Russia. But
so the State Department said it was unlikely that a direct energy attack had caused the health incidents. 976 cases of the 1,000 reviewed deemed that it was not the result of a sustained global campaign by a hostile foreign power. But what are they saying now? They're saying now that it's got to be a sustained global campaign by a hostile foreign power, namely Russia. So that's going to be the new. Who knows?
Are there new victims? Why is it in the news again?
Good question.
It's these 3 media organizations did a media investigation, so they looked at all headlines and stuff. We don't know why the hell. Just panic. And it doesn't stop idiots like John Bolton saying, "I warned you. It's dangerous."
No, I mean it's gotta be just part of the propaganda war. I mean, you had some people sitting down in a table and they're like, "Hey, we've got some bad press with this terrorist attack against Russia. We really have to make sure Russia isn't seen as the victim. We really have to remind people that Russia is an aggressive terrorist state, and so let's pull this shit out of our ass." I mean,
well, does anyone remember the whole Putin is putting bounties on American soldiers in Afghanistan?
Yeah. That had zero substance.
Zero substance. And they memory hold that because, and I think that one got memory holds for good, and they're not going to bring that up again because we have our own proxy against Russia. So they can't bring out an accusation that Russia's doing something. So. But
you think they will be constrained by integrity, and we'll never see that.
Integrity is just you don't want to put bad press on the idea of a proxy war when you're doing a proxy war. But
that could be. So, Ian, I did read your most recent article at the Reading Junkie. Highly recommend everyone checking it out. That's a little off topic. We could maybe address it. You were just talking about the Democrat Republican.
What's up with the elections? I don't really.
So
other than Trump made bail or something, I don't really know.
My most recent post. Is there a link in the comments? We could even drop a link in the comments for people.
We can. Let me do that.
What I was talking about in that most recent post, I mean, it is related to Democrats and Republicans. So Sunday was Easter Sunday, and it was also the Transgender Day of Visibility, and there was a big letter from the Biden White House about it, and it got, of course, predictably got Christian and conservative outlets kind of riled up about it. And I wrote a post basically saying it shows how ineffective conservatism as a movement has gotten. They fuss about, because at this point it's just as far as Democrats have effectively won the culture war. This is just kind of a victory lap for them. So ineffectively crying that Biden's doing this or that is all Republicans and conservatives can do at this point. And I also pointed out there's a certain level of hypocrisy to it because they complain, Democrats are woke, Biden is woke, liberals are woke. Let's point out, if you look at back in the 80s and 1970s, American conservatives have always been more liberal than other global audiences, just always, since at least the 1960s, sexual revolution onwards. And Reagan was the king of woke. He practically invented woke. If you want to talk about being politically correct, imagine taking these dirty child raping terrorists, literally terrorists from northern Afghanistan, and bringing them to the White House for that little sit down, like they're serious state leaders. So that's
brave Mujahideen freedom fighters.
Yes, the brave freedom fighters. And I also pointed out that when it comes to an international, a global struggle, Democrats played the long game a lot smarter. Because they realize, hey, this ideological battle between Democrats and Republicans is not just in the USA, it's a global conflict. So they got, I'm sure, Ben, this, if you look at in the European Union, like across the board, they're in the Democratic camp. They like Democrat. Obama still does his tours of Europe, like even though he's not even the president anymore, but they still kiss his feet when he does his little tours of Europe. The Democrats over decades did a much better job of getting a global ideological alliance behind their ideas, particularly in Europe. And Republicans, they're not liked by anybody. And even obvious allies. So you have more, you could say, socially conservative governments like Russia or Hungary. There are obvious international allies for Republicans, but they always spurn them. They never say, oh, hey, Orban's our guy. No one in the Republican camp has ever, not once, even suggested that. And I don't think even Trump said that. They've never said, oh, hey, these Hungarian government, they're our guys, they're our butts. They do not do that. So there's just not even a benefit in Putin or Orban or anybody aligning with Republicans. I think Putin in particular tried. I mean, I remember there was a pretty public, before he was president, I think he was still the deputy mayor of St. Petersburg. He did a visit of Washington and buddied up with Republicans, and they liked him at the time. But that didn't get him anything. So why at this point cry? It's just sour grapes for Republicans to cry at this point. So that's the synopsis of what I said in that post.
Yeah, true enough. I mean, Carlo, you got something?
Yeah, the thing is the abortion issue is becoming very, very large in the campaign, and that shows the core problem that the Republicans have, not the MAGA people, let's say, or the Trump people have, and that is on the one hand, and this goes back to traditional Republican sentiments or policies. That is, we want smaller government, yet they use government to interfere at every level of people's personal lives. So that contradiction is coming to the fore in the abortion, especially in the abortion rights issue, and it's obviously women are turning away from voting for Trump in droves because they don't agree with that issue. They want their bodies to be their bodies, and it sounds like a cliche. I mean, back in the day in the '60s, there was our bodies ourselves, and that's ingrained in the culture now. That's part of the culture, and women are empowered to do virtually anything now, and they see that as an affront to all of those gains, and it's not just the narrow political gains. It's a mindset, a change in the way they feel about their whole gender, and I think that's playing a major role here. I will say I still think Trump will win, and that will be a kind of. I mean, it's a rock and a hard place. Who would want to have either of these people? This ninny, this 70. How old is Biden? 81-year-old ninny.
Don't pretend like this isn't the greatest democracy the world has ever seen, Carlo. You get to choose between two great Americans.
Right, the rematch everybody wanted, right?
They're still free, but to be honest, if I were American, I wouldn't vote for either three. But I like that RFK Jr. said that Biden is a bigger threat to democracy, apparently, than Trump. Probably a campaign thing, but at least he came out and said that, even though he's one of the worst Zionist bastards out there. But I wouldn't vote for anyone in the U.S., absolutely. As a European, I have my preference, and I have my reasons.
See, I watched that interview, and I think RFK was he was schooled not to mention Ukraine because he's been very eloquent on Ukraine, but in that interview that did not come up.
Yeah, went
down.
Greg, you're from Obama country. What are your thoughts on the domestic political scene?
The most depressing election yet, I think. Two dotards.
Wait, Obama was Illinois boy? Was he?
Yeah, he's from Chicago.
Yeah. Community activist there.
Yeah, I can actually see his library going up from my office in Hyde Park.
Oh God!
So what about the culture war? So Ian's take I thought was good. I would just say that I don't think that anybody is really principled. Like I don't think the Democrats have principles. I don't think the Republicans have principles. I think that they are kind of manufactured to divide people based on these principles and try and inculcate this, somewhat, top-down cultural division. And so, when the Republicans don't behave in line with their claimed principles, like that's no surprise because ultimately what matters is, the power of the ruling class, the uniparty, and to maintain this, duopolistic system where it's, heads they win, tails we lose, and they don't really care. But if it's the Republicans or if it's the Democrats for the most part. But at the same time, the Democrats seem to have done very well in the culture war, and definitely the the more liberal cultural ideology is more dominant. It's dominant, and it's being forced, like Ian was saying, on our vassals, in the EU and things like that. But I don't know. I think ultimately the only principle that matters to them is the maintenance of their empire, and they're going to do whatever they can to and all the other principles are going to be subservient to that primary interest.
I want to add one thing about the transgender and Easter Sunday, and that is I don't appreciate the Biden administration shoving transgender people out into the spotlight and basically enraging and endangering these people for a political statement. Yeah. I do not appreciate that at all. And
as far as I can tell,
that was dirty. That's cynical stuff.
It was also a calendar.
That's the main result. So let me just say, Scott Ritter even came down on it. He was hostile toward it. But go ahead, Ben.
I thought it was like mostly a calendar thing. At least it was when Biden pulled back, it was presented as such, like maybe for years this was already this day, but this year it fell on Easter Sunday, and it's more of a calendar thing and then a political thing. But who the hell knows? Yeah.
So we had a trifecta. It was Cesar Chavez Day. It was Easter Sunday, and then it was whatever the whole label was for what did they call
Visibility Day?
Visibility.
Day of visibility.
It was all 3 days. It was a real big holiday, but I had to work anyway. It's weird.
Well, I want to point out that about domestic issues. I think Greg was right when he said that Ukraine's really being kept out of the spotlight for the most part. And that's true. And I actually said that in that post. There was no. Because I think that when you look at a global issue, when there's a big terrorist attack in Moscow, that was a good opportunity for Trump, even for Robert F. Kennedy or Marjorie Greene or any of these other kind of dissident MAGA or just anti-Biden types to bring up. It's like, hey, was the USA involved? There was no call for investigation. There's no call for answers. The state, Blinken. Yeah. It'd be great to have Blinken appear in front of Congress and be grilled on what did the State Department know about this attack. Present, and investigate that internally and see if the USA was involved. And I think that would actually look good on the global stage if the USA did that. But no one in the conservative camp or the anti-Biden camp wants to do that. They're just towing the line. And I think that's from a long war perspective, it benefits to just have Americans not thinking about all those billions of dollars going to Ukraine. It's just beneficial to have that turn into kind of like in Iraq, because Iraq and Afghanistan were mostly out of the news, even though they were dragging on. They were just kept out of the news cycle. And I think that's what they're trying to do with Ukraine. Keep it going, but keep it out of the news cycle.
If things were going a little bit better for them, that would not be the case. They would be glad to promote how badly Russia's getting beaten if that were the case. But since that's not the case, it's totally different coverage. Go ahead, Ben.
I'm glad you mentioned Blinken, because I just saw before we started, I'm afraid I don't have a clip, but it was boring anyway. Blinken standing next to Stéphane Séjourné, the French foreign minister, right? One of the little gay boys of Macron. And the gay boy said that all the attacks that Ukraine is doing on Russia's energy infrastructure, he considers, proper military targets in aim to win the war. And Blinken immediately said, no, the United States does not approve of these strikes because, Brent crude just went to like 2-year high, $85 per barrel or something like that. So it's not in their interest. And on my continent, at least, this is what's interesting to me in the U.S. division. I mean, what do we see? The U.S. doesn't really have an appetite even for the basic, this 60 whatever billion aid. Johnson's doing all sorts of tricks like let's expand gas exploration so other Republicans can get on board in exchange for signing off this security exponential, whatever that thing. He's trying to say, okay, we'll do it in an aid form. We'll do it by confiscating Russian assets, and it's not sure. And the liberals are terrified in the U.S. There was this Biden short thing on a radio or something, but I just heard it audio only. That apparently a lot of leaders abroad told him, "You got to stop like Trump from winning, Trump from being nominated. I don't know which one." That Europeans saying our democracy is in danger, whatever, mine or the saying this stuff. And I think there's a clear divergence. I just want to bring up one more story, which was in the Evening Standard, Brit madness, tabloid level shit. But what it did at the end of it, it was lamenting that, Germany, Italy, France, and others, they're actually secretly or openly looking for a compromise deal to end the war. And they don't, and there was this initiative to not recognize Vladimir Putin as the president of Russia, as petty as it is, but it came from the US, egging on the Poles and I think the Brits. It's like somebody we used to call it the collective West, but the US is tired, and they want someone to go. It's looking catastrophic. Like there was a headline about a summer victory for Russia, however. But please someone jump in, because we don't really have the money, the resources, the missiles, whatever. And I think it's looking like throwing you guys under the bus. That's what's interesting to me.
It's such a vassal mentality, though, because it's like some guy in Iberia or Germania during the Roman Empire saying, what is Rome doing about this problem? We have these Visigoths at our border. Why isn't Rome doing something? Or there's a dispute for the throne, we can't, I want this emperor. I don't want that other guy to be emperor. It's funny to see Europeans arguing about the U.S. election, like it's their emperor that is.
I mean, in a way it is. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
But they're so emotionally invested in the American elections. And I think that's.
Well, I think they're opposed to Trump, right? I mean,
oh, absolutely.
Their emotions are anti-Trump as opposed to really pro-Biden. That's the bulk of the emotions. But I mean, with good reason. I mean, he went over there. He was pushing his way right to the front of those Europeans. It was just hilarious.
Well, and that's the thing. I think Trump actually kind of reveals. He's not. I don't think he's completely a dissident. He does voice things that other. He does voice class interests that other people are thinking, but they don't voice openly like he does. So, the USA does see the European Union a rival, just like Russia. And this has definitely hurts the European Union to the same extent, or actually worse than Russia. It's
right.
And so when
they
Trump
should know it, shouldn't they?
Yes, well, and Trump comes out and says, and so what Trump would do is escalate the war with the European Union, make it an economic war, restart the tariff war, which I think the Europeans might be just as scared of as, everything going on with Russia, an actual trade war with the USA. I mean, now that they've cut ties with Russia, the USA and China are their only big markets left, and the USA might, with Trump in office, might destroy what's left of it for those poor Europeans.
I mean, the U.S. has a long history of not being very friendly to their vassals. We can ask the Kurds about that. But yeah, we use people as far as it benefits our interests, and then we treat them like shit. But hey, if that's what they want, they keep coming back for more.
I just wish, they should be able to read, because that was like over the weekend on the pages of Bloomberg, very open. I love that magazine for this reason. It said the American dream is easy to sell for German factories because Europe's response is all stick, no carrot. Therefore, we can win over all those German factories. I mean, the Germans, Mr. Lindner, the finance minister, has to know, they're gutting us. They're taking our industrial economy away while we are doing their bloody bidding here with the Taurus and all that, and doing the legalities.
Yeah,
but they have to be aware of this.
You'd think the people would see what's happening and demand a better governance, demand sovereignty.
Well,
go ahead.
The unspoken part of the bargain is that Europe will, in the original plan, get to re-neo-colonize Russia, get to
They'd
reinvest
get a
in their
slice of it.
oil and minerals and all that. That's why they're, I think, going. I mean, they don't have a choice, but that's what they're hoping to get out of it, which probably they're worried Trump would
maybe
make
that was
even
the
less
promises
likely.
made.
I think they would have gotten a slice of the pie, but 2 years in, they have to know what's going on. But as you said, after everything, after these 2 years, they really don't have a choice. They put so much of their political capital, their life on this. It's going to be ugly.
I would like to recognize our viewers. Sorry for the abrupt shift, but I want to thank Yasha Ashayeri from Canada for watching. We got Polly. She's a regular viewer. And Gregor Jankovic. It might have been originally ascribed to China. I mean, I think they call it Havana syndrome because obviously it was in Cuba. But yeah, they could have been blaming like the Chinese embassy there. They could have been blaming the Russian embassy. It's really, it's a propaganda narrative that they really invested in. They got it into everybody's mind. And I did want to say that along those same lines, I'll bet you most of my listeners, even in the international community, have heard about this lady who spilled hot coffee on her lap in the 80s or maybe early 90s. And then she sued McDonald's and she got a big payout. And people were just up in arms. How can, somebody spill coffee on themselves and then sue that it's too hot? So, you guys know about this? Let's just take a quick poll of this panel. Have you guys heard about this story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's a documentary called Hot Coffee, and it really it talks about that specific example and explains how, the ruling elites have the ability to put these ideas and these stories, just beam them into everybody's minds. Like, what a weird thing for everybody to know about. That this lady spilled coffee, but there was a reason that everybody needed to know about it. So I recommend this documentary called Hot Coffee, and it just kind of again explains how these narratives can be manufactured and then just put right into people's heads, in order to further some kind of an agenda. Of course, the agenda back then was to limit corporate liability and things like that. But yes, Carlo.
I've never heard about. Go ahead, Carlo.
All right. I just want to say several things. I want to go back to the transgender thing.
All right. Before you go back,
I don't do PR. I don't do PR for a living because it's obvious. But I at least would have said, look, let's celebrate the Transgender Day on Saturday because we want to take into account the Christians in the country who have differing views. That would have got him some fucking votes, the idiot Biden. Number two, Mr. Yankovic is on here. My understanding, Mr. Yankovic, is not yet has the Czech Republic come up with the money to buy the ordinance that we were talking about last week. They haven't been able to come up with it.
And
so,
you remember when
you talked about a million shells being on their way or whatever. So I want to clear that up.
Carlo's got the memory of an elephant.
We should talk about Macron within the context of what we were just saying about Europe. Is Macron serious, or is this another farce? I mean, what is with Macron taking over European foreign policy? Anybody?
He's not taking over. He wants to. He obviously has that little Bonaparte syndrome. But I think he's back against the wall. With the economic indicators, I think Zero Hedge, right? The Tyler Durden guy did a rundown about sovereign debt versus GDP, and the worst thing that could lead Europe into a big depression is, first of all, France, second, Italy. Just looking at, they both have budget holes, as well as Germany has a huge budget hole. So there's an economic crisis while he's preparing for the Paris Olympics, which we'll also get into, and sort of, the homeless people and the migrants, he's sort of bagging them up and taking them up to another city. Some mayors are pissed off about this. While he got booted out of Africa, which a lot of the fortune, of France originally comes from, his back is against the wall. He got sold the same lie that Greg talked about, that, we'll carve up Russia, all of that. iron ore, the energy, all the fertilizer, all of that will be, yours and will be just fine, including the rare earths and all that. And now it looks like, well, that's fucked. What am I going to do to stave off a collapse in Ukraine, which would be the end of NATO and a possible cracking of the EU, which is, I think, what we're looking at. And it's, for me, it's very stupid panic, but I love that the Germans still paid both ends. There's this two articles, separate articles in the German media, whichever one I think it was FAS, like Frankfurt Allgemeine, saying the German legal experts say NATO defense won't be able to cover his little troops if he sends them into Ukraine. But they also said foreign troops in Ukraine would be perfectly in line with international law. So okay, if you want to do it, go. You go first. We'll go both ways, but you're not going to be protected by NATO. So
he said they were going to be trainers, right? I mean, that was basically he clarified.
That's his retreat.
The troops that we're going to send in are just going to be in a training capacity. But
Whereas Hanno Pevkur, one of the little Estonian midgets, Estonia or one of the other midget states who are like absolutely willing to self-sacrifice at this moment, saying we're going to be invaded next. That guy, he also spilled the beans on the Czech ammo not being like we have more ammo than we have money. Unfortunately, funding is not there. And he also said on Macron's words that he was talking about sending troops, but all NATO nations already have people there. They're just trainers and people who come and go from time to time. So he's trying to ease that. Come on, France, come on, help us out. Send those guys. We know, we see what's going on the battlefield. Just a quick response to Billy Bob's story about the woman with the coffee stain. I never heard that story before. Might have been behind the iron wall. But we have some basic, like, what do you call these things? Folk wisdoms in Hungary. And one is that, the Germans are precise. British scientists are fools. The Baltics are slow. Mm-hmm. And what do we know about the Americans? They sue. That's like a standard thing in Europe. We know Americans, when confronted with any problem, they sue. That's kind of a European thing.
To add some context to the story, what happened was this old woman went through the drive-through at McDonald's, got a hot coffee, and she pulled into the parking lot. Basically, accidentally spilled the coffee on her leg, got third-degree burns. And basically what happened was, of course, this is America. There's no such thing as free healthcare. So she was just basically left with medical bills that she could not afford. So basically, she'd asked the McDonald's, hey, because this happened on your property, can you just give me $3,000 or whatever it was? And they didn't. So she basically hired an attorney and she sued because, she was not going to afford her bills. Well, what happens is that was the tip of the icebergs. And McDonald's had made a mistake by not just paying her, because it turned out McDonald's keeps their coffee at a much higher temperature than other restaurants.
I didn't know.
And actually they had done an internal, and what really damned McDonald's in this case was that they had done an internal study showing that we know, X number of people are going to be burned by our coffee every year, but it is cheaper to hassle with them in court individually than to lower the price of coffee, lower the temperature of coffee. We'll save more money burning people deliberately then. So basically her, the punitive damages, so the court gave her punitive damages, and it was 2 days of revenue for coffee, what they gave at, which was however many millions of dollars, which is 2 days of coffee sales for McDonald's. But what Billy Bob mentioned was the corporate liability. This did end up getting turned around into a victory, because all McDonald's did, and everybody else followed suit, just put a warning. Oh, danger, this coffee is hot. Like that. Because obviously she did not deliberately pour coffee on herself. People don't deliberately pour scalding hot coffee on themselves. But that just said, as long as you put a warning on your foods, you're completely fine if people get injured. So that was
the corporate America saw a problem with consumers not, being able to sue. And they really tried to create this problem in the minds of the citizens. They wanted the minds of the citizens to think that the poor corporations are unfairly targeted by these individual greedy hucksters. And so their case number one was this woman who freaking, everybody knows coffee's hot. It's not McDonald's fault you poured it on yourself by accident. Why are you suing them? But there was a lot more to the story, like you said. And but the idea that really, I mean, I'm surprised Ben hasn't heard that story. But I mean, I guess it was during the Cold War, and because I think it was pre-'89. And obviously, there's going to be, you know, what do they call that wall?
The Iron Curtain.
Iron Curtain. The Iron Curtain kept that propaganda out. But everybody in the West has, I mean, even kids today are familiar with. That's when I say kids, of course, I mean 20-somethings probably. But it was a really well invested in, propaganda campaign, and it just got, everybody's heard about it. And that's and the documentary talks about that, about how the Chamber of Commerce and all these corporate groups really invested heavily in this issue, and they did win because they got laws. They got laws in all the states limiting corporate liability, and they have example after example about how people.
So they got spooked by this case that they created.
Yeah, no, I mean, they used the case as the example, but they saw this trend happening and they wanted to nip it in the bud and deal with it, and they certainly did.
Because the headlines, and what he said.
Spanish Fabs has heard it.
Yes, and I think it was after '89. I'd have to look. But anyways, I do, and the way the journalists and all these media outlets, they portray, like Billy Bob said, they portrayed this, this grandma as the villain of the story, and the poor multinational $1 trillion corporation is the victim here, and it's. And Americans don't think it's unfortunate. We have this very capitalist mindset. We always side with the corporation or the billionaire, and it's ingrained in us through generations of propaganda. You would think, logically, just a normal person would read that headline and be like, okay, you know what? I do think if someone gets injured on the location of a business, on that business property, the business should have some reasonable liability for accidents that happen on their property. I think that's a reasonable thing to think. But I say, oh no, poor McDonald's can't be responsible.
But if we see ourselves as billionaires that have just been temporarily set back, I mean, we're going to identify with our own, and so.
I'm just going to put some more money into Bitcoin.
You can sue them. Anybody can sue them.
Your personal responsibility. Right?
We're all people here, just like McDonald's. I like that. Maybe this was like 10, 15 years ago, but we had another imported celebration, which was Halloween, and we were looking for fucking American import costumes, and I found a Superman. But it had like this disclosure of stuff, like it doesn't grant you powers to go through walls, or you can't just, your eyes won't shoot lasers, please don't jump from anything. It's all this liability from America. It had to be already put in there, and we always laugh, like, how stupid do they think they are? But I didn't understand this legal background, like avoid liability. That's the thing. You say everything before anything happens.
And I wouldn't say that, corporations are, corporations suck, but, they're not completely insane for doing it. What does happen in the USA is because we are kind of crazy like that. These certain industries get much larger than they should. So lots of people will get the same degree. So law degrees became very popular. So you have more attorneys than you know what to do with, and all these attorneys need business. So they're looking for someone to sue. So it's this kind of, So it is true. We are. I'm not absolving by any stretch of the imagination, absolving McDonald's for what they did in that case, but it is true. We are litigation happy, and it's because we have just this huge. It's that GDP, baby. We got to have, everybody. Every time someone sues somebody, that makes the GDP go up. Oh, look, we.
Plus, there's the hustle.
Yeah.
If this can bring me, I mean, she obviously didn't, but a lot of people look for these things, don't they? Just to sue someone, get some money. I'm pretty sure there's a culture of that now.
It's a little surprising because most McDonald's are franchises. So an individual has to get a note from a bank or some other lending entity, and McDonald's will grant him a franchise. And I really don't know how that played into this, but I would imagine it's because once you have a franchise, McDonald's can dictate every aspect of that business, what you can do and can't do, and that's probably where their liability came in, and the franchisee was. I don't think he was implicated at all. He or she or whoever owned the franchise was liable at all. So
that's probably the correct way. I think that's probably true. You can't just set up your own menu or run the kitchen the way you want. You have to follow the McDonald's rules, and so it's the corporate chain that's liable.
Yeah,
not the franchisee.
And that's who has the money too. That's who has the money. So that's where you're going to go if you're a good lawyer. But to contextualize this whole discussion, I mean, we're talking about, I think the most important thing is the soft power apparatus of the West and just their ability to, control the media and then manufacture people's opinions one way or another. And so this is a specific example of how it happens domestically, but internationally, we see it happening in that most people, I think it's safe to say that most people, who knows? I mean, definitely in Europe. Most people in Europe are supporting Ukraine, right? Ukraine is the good guy. Russia's the bad guy. China's bad. Israel's good. The Palestinians are bad. And just to inculcate these opinions within people by using this soft power apparatus. And then they also use it within certain countries to affect regime change, to sow division, and to, undermine countries targeted for regime change or destabilization. And and that's really the elephant of all elephants in the room that, when we talk about what's going on geopolitically is we have to address. Like it's the biggest thing because, our military power is one thing, but our soft power is really what is driving Western imperialism. And it's really what we got to overcome. And, people need to be more savvy. And they need to know that everything you see on TV isn't necessarily true.
Fair point, yes.
What a concept.
The only democracy in the Middle East, the free and democratic Ukraine, which apparently didn't have a presidential election, so he's no longer, legally the president, Mr. Zelensky.
Yeah. Associating these buzzwords with Western imperialism, getting people to perceive Western imperialism, tyrannical, authoritarian, violent, genocidal Western imperialism as freedom and democracy. Like, imagine that people buy that.
Yeah, I think this week I first read the line that at least, in terms of writing, the bloodsucker in the Kremlin will be dead. That was in that huge copium.
At least politically. Yeah, no, I saw that.
Yeah, Le Grandeur de France, saying, two guys, a Russian expat living in the US and a US criminologist wrote this op-ed for the Kiev fucking Post, right? They were talking about what the Macron doctrine, how it should be put into practice, 500 aircraft, Swedish Gripens, British, whatever the fuck they have, and Eurofighters going in there, locking up the sky, no-fly zone, right? And basically it will end everything. And that was the final line, the bloodsucker in the Kremlin. Jesus
finally suffer defeat.
Yeah, it's pie in the sky. At the same time, Mr. Zelensky, he's fired 8 aides and 4 advisors. This is after the sacking of Danilov, right? He's retreating into the bunker, and he still thinks no, we're talking about Bucha. We're not talking about the Crocus City Hall. And he's talking via remote to The Hague, saying Putin won't escape justice and stuff he's still in this framework of, well, nobody agrees with me, but, we can absolutely win. And the other one, which we might get to, unless you have some thoughts to add, is I see something very similar happening to Mr. Netanyahu in Tel Aviv.
Well, to wrap up my whole soapboxing of the soft power apparatus, that's the limitations of soft power. When reality is contradicting the soft power only has so much efficacy because the reality on the ground is totally different. And then you're stuck. Then you're fucking stuck. What are you going to do now? How are you going to spin your narrative to account for the reality that is 180 degrees different from what you've been claiming it is? Or 360 degrees, depending on your perspective.
And when it's not backed up by hard power. Just a quick share on 2 articles I've read. One was the Carnegie Endowment for whatever, international peace,
Democracy.
big US democracy, that one.
Yeah.
And it wrote this huge thing about how should we respond to the Crocus terrorist attack, and maybe the best answer is not to respond at all. But it wasn't about Russia at all. It was about the limited resources we have in arms, ammunition, in ISAR capabilities, intelligence capabilities, and we shouldn't start a quagmire like Afghanistan or anything like that again. And maybe the best thing is to focus on the US and the fleet, and of course the Pacific, China. And on the other hand, there was this guy, the leader, the CEO of Rheinmetall. I'm blanking on his name, but he had this huge article in the German press being absolutely terrified and saying it out loud that the US is not going to jump in and save us again if there's a conflict in Europe. Everybody seems to have taken for granted that they're going to be here to back us up. But, and I quote, we're on our own. And it's like a shiver down their spines. Like they never thought this would happen without a US hard power bailout. Yeah, you can spew all the soft power and follow the Mr. Blinkens and the Newlands and all that in rhetoric. When it comes across the stone wall of reality, there's going to be a big fucking crack. It's going to be painful.
Well, I've written about this before too. It's like if the US was going to have even, any kind of large-scale conventional war, even if we went into assuming that nobody would go nuclear, just with that assumption, if we had any kind of large-scale conventional war with peer or near peer opponents like Russia, well, we'd have to mobilize reservists for one before we did anything. About 40% of the force would have to be reservists, and people would not be too happy about being pulled from their civilian jobs and sent for the reserve obligations. And there would also be conscription. We would have to, because there's no backfills. The inactive reserves is down to under 6 digits right now. They would have to conscript people. They'd have to activate that selective service and start running people through basic training before the war even started, because it takes months to train a person. So I think people don't realize that, the only reason Americans kind of support, or at least don't oppose all these foreign adventures right now, is because they involve very small numbers of people. No one is sent against their will. Mm-hmm. That would not happen in Europe. If there was a major war in Europe, we couldn't do that. I think everybody in the Pentagon and even the White House
and Europe can't do that. There are these recruitment crises all over the West, including the US, Germany, France, all of these states. And Mr. Christian Lindner, the finance minister of Germany, said the economic price, I think Israel is learning that now, would be too high for a general conscription in Germany, because all of these workers, we have a worker shortage in the meantime. So there's that angle to it. Sorry, Colin.
I can certainly attest to the consequences of a conscription or the draft, because I was 1A for 7 years, but Billy Bob is really on to and I fought it for 7 fucking years. But Billy Bob is really onto something with the soft power, especially when it comes to Europe, because this stuff about Russia wanting to invade all of Europe, that's to get people in the mindset of Hitler. But it's a lie. It's not true. He doesn't want to do it. So they're really out on a limb now, as far as their propaganda goes, because what's going to be demonstrable about Russia when it moves to the Dnieper and takes over that territory is that they don't have any intention of going into Europe. No matter what incitement Europe and the U.S. makes, they're not going to do it. So that's the gap, Billy Bob, you're talking about. That's a big one.
When they imagine if they take Odessa, imagine the screams. Moldova's next, Poland is next, Romania's next. I mean, that's what they're going to be screaming at the top of their lungs, and it's going to be not true, because Odessa is a Russian city. And if they allow Ukraine to have access to the sea, I mean, they're going to use that access for the next several decades to
and Transnistria might be even more volatile in that regard. But still, they're trying to they literally try to call Putin Hitler, and it has no efficacy. It has none.
Yeah.
Transnistria as a way of trying to show Putin is aggressive, provoking
Well,
problems?
he'd have to, it's technically Moldovan territory,
Right.
so yeah, they would probably make a big noise about that. The thing is that nobody out there knows what Transnistria is, so it may be ineffectual in that regard.
Mhm.
I can't really think of a parallel offhand historically, but
It's
think
unrecognized since the fall of the Soviet Union, but they kept pretty much, all the statues, the tanks there, like a stuck-in-time Soviet Republic. I think it's Pridnovian Moldovan Republic PMR, the unrecognized, like a little edge, a little sliver of Moldova.
Yeah,
when we're talking about the lack of military capacity to back up our soft power talk, Iran is a very good topic to focus on, because a war with Iran would necessitate a huge military force if we ever thought we were going to, affect regime change and put in a government that is friendly with the U.S. Like we couldn't even do it with Iraq, and that's a much smaller country. If we had to do it with Iran, we would definitely need, I think we would need to do a conscription. There's no way we could occupy that huge country unless we had a huge proxy force. We would have to put a lot of boots on the ground. It would be nonsense. And this, I think, is also explains that, or demonstrates that those people that think that Israel is the tail that wags the U.S. dog, or they claim that, the United States is a Zionist-occupied government. Of course, to a small extent, that's true, but ultimately, it's the U.S. that calls the shots, and it's the Israel that's the proxy of the U.S., because Israel would have had us invading Iran 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, and if, Israel was the boss of the United States, that would have happened. And the fact that there's no military option with Iran, and the United States knows that, and that's why we haven't attacked them already.
Well, 20 years ago, we did actually invade Iraq, and if you remember, I know everybody's kind of memory holds this now, but the plan originally was to have a 7-country as presence. It failed so terribly. It never went beyond Iraq and Afghanistan.
Iran was the last on that confidential list, right?
Libya was on that list. Wesley Clark revealed that list.
Yes.
Yeah. Toppling Libya was the best that could be done, because we obviously couldn't, and just turn it into a failed state, because that was the next best option from that.
And one that's plaguing now a lot of the arms that Boko Haram and other fundamentalist groups are using against the states in the Sahel come through Libya, and that was a master plan. All along. That's why I think Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are really courageous countries. And I have in Senegal. I tend to think that the change in the administration in Senegal with the elections has a lot to do with Western NGOs. I think they had all those people in the streets because the previous president was doing a job reminiscent of what Traore's doing in Burkina Faso, but it didn't work. It was like the NGOs down there working for Western governments were able to basically get him out. I can't remember his name. It begins DOUS.
So that's unfortunate to hear. I take your word for it, and I trust your expertise on the matter. So they had a decent independent sovereign government, and then the NGOs were able to effect and then get somebody that is more sympathetic.
But they didn't want this guy. They didn't want this guy. That's important.
He came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
He came out of nowhere. Now
so he can still do a lot of good. Yeah.
His last name
so there's some room for optimism. I know Brian Berletic is clear that NGOs is such a misnomer. They should be called just GEOs. because these non-governmental organizations are funded by government and they do the bidding of government.
Yeah.
But so
also,
I mean, the Sahel region, I mean, they're not, the Western imperialism isn't doing too well. I mean, they lost Niger, like you said, they lost Mali. Senegal is a struggle.
Yeah, and I'm really cautious about the new guy because I was really behind Ruto in Kenya, and he basically turned out to be a sellout because he's very willing to send 1,000 of his police force to Haiti to pacify Haiti against the gangs, and we want to talk about soft power. You can talk about the guy they call the Butcher. If you really look into it, he's anything but that.
He's a really good guy. Barbecue Cherizier. I just saw a lot of.
Thank you, man. Yeah, he's anything but that. But to the West, especially to the U.S. media, he's just a cutthroat gang member. You know, so
I'm trying to resist leaving Iran. Haiti is obviously. I mean, we'll see what happens. I heard Kenya was backtracking on sending peacekeepers, so hopefully that doesn't happen. But Iran is really the biggest news. I think of all the news of since Friday, the Israeli provocative attack on the Iranian embassy in Syria. And maybe it wasn't a direct attack on the embassy. The embassy was damaged, and they really hit like a house next to it, allegedly. And they killed some top diplomats and generals from Iran. And it's just a huge provocation. And Israel's trying really, really hard to engineer a greater conflict that'll draw the U.S. in. So that's been their agenda for decades. And they're really getting desperate, and the desperation shows in their actions. So I've seen the most sensible analysts that I've read, they really expect Iran to not take the bait, and that Iran is smart. They're gonna have a response, but it'll be a measured response, and it won't be an escalatory one, because Iran understands that they're winning the long game and Israel is losing, and so they're not gonna bite for this provocation. But what are your guys' thoughts? I probably just stole everyone's thunder.
No, I agree. There's it's the symmetry between Russia, Ukraine, and basically Iran, Israel at this point, which started with Gaza and the resistance. But really, Iran is the big boy in the house. I'm with you. But I think Greg has already had like an idea or a thought spark. Maybe not. Sorry, I thought you wanted to maybe speak before me.
Oh, no, I'm on the same page that Iran does not want to be provoked and has been very careful and has a lot to lose.
Yeah, I mean, I could tie this back to the limits of soft power that Billy Bob as a theme sort of launched us on, and I really like it because, help me, when was the Iranian Revolution? 1978, 79? 79, thank you. Since then, I mean, they've been constantly trying to get the regime, the evil Islamic regime out, and they absolutely failed. They also failed in Bashar Assad's Syria, so they tried like a hybrid, ISIS, the white helmets, all of that sort of approach. Then Russia came in and then stopped them dead in their tracks. And when it comes to the limits of soft power, yeah, you can say we're the biggest democracy in these, but this was the tip of the iceberg on Easter weekend, and so what Israel did, Mr. Netanyahu went to a big hospital, right, in Jerusalem to get like a hernia surgery. And at the same time, on the same day, the IDF left the, what do you call it, Al-Shifa Hospital, the biggest sort of complex. It's like 60% of the medical capacity in Gaza. And I'm not going to show the horrible pictures that you can see here and there, but I'm going to show this. They left it like this. And the other pictures that I won't show you, which I'm worse off foreseeing, as I've seen, this is littered with bodies, including shot point blank, including half or partially or fully flattened by a tank or a bulldozer. And this is for everyone to see around the world. At the same time, they attacked this. I think that was also somewhere. Oh no, that was in Gaza, where the World Central Kitchen, not NGO. That's not an NGO. It's an aid organization. Guys got killed, like 7 of them, and apparently they were Polish. One was a Canadian American. There were 2 other nationalities that I'm blanking on, but they killed those guys. And that's the one they said, well, yeah, that was us, but it was one of those tragic accidents. And they also did this car bomb, in northern Syria. And then came this attack on a consulate building. And their sort of hopium is, well, we don't recognize it. This is a military target. This isn't an embassy of any sort. I saw the spokesperson for the government, Likud party, say this, that we don't think it was. This is a terrorist attack on 2 sovereign nations at the same time, and it's very serious. But, again, Netanyahu, it's obvious to anybody he wants to drag the US into a big hot war because he feels it's like quicksand, everything slipping. The more he struggles, the deeper he gets into the shit. So that's the summary of atrocity after atrocity, and soft power is not really going to be helped. I mean, there was a big article about Saudi Arabia stuck between 2 things: the popular anger at Israel and the US pressure to try to recognize it. And I don't see them actually being able to just go westward as they have previously. And the other, obviously, is Al-Sisi. The World Bank or the IMF, I don't know which one, may have doubled their sort of bailout money, but the people of Egypt, that's a whole other question. That's what I see here happening, and it's horrific.
I mean, hopefully, at least 50% of that money gets trickled down to the population in the forms of, government wages and things like that. But I'm sure the elites at the top take at least a 50% cut of that $9 billion.
Yeah, I hope in the multipolar world, it has to be like a core tenet that comprador is not allowed. You have to be sovereign, and meaning you have to be in the interest of your people. You have to act in their interest, otherwise you're out. It should be codified in some way at some point in the future.
And it's a tribute. It's a testament to the efficacy of soft power that these societies allow their governments to be tools of different governments. I mean, you can't do that without having a society that's divided, confused, and uninformed, and really politically disenfranchised. And how do you do that? You do that by spamming bullshit Hollywood movies on them, talking about things that don't matter, and all the things that we're familiar of in the West. And so it's not, they've gotten very good at creating idiots who are disenfranchised and can't take political power, can't have any political influence on their government or their society. Sorry, Carla, go ahead.
No, that's all right. You just answered Mr. Doherty's question.
Oh,
yeah.
When it's going to trickle down to the public, and the answer will be never. I don't want to get off topic here, but there's 2 propaganda things now running on Showtime and HBO. There's one about the Russian Revolution and this count that's under house arrest.
A Gentleman in Moscow, a British production. Yes.
Is that a British production?
Yeah.
And it's so ludicrous, based on a bestseller. So that tells you it's garbage. But and then there's the other one where there's this female leader of an Eastern Bloc type country, though, and she and there's some interesting things about interesting truths about what American foreign policy is really about, hegemony, and but by and large, it's just a vehicle for showing how bad things would be under a dictatorship and how deluded dictators are. So there's this active propaganda as well as this generalized ignorance, and it's I don't know how you defeat it. I really don't.
I mean, so my answer to Todd would be, when the material conditions change, and the material conditions can change when the American people are asked to sacrifice. I don't think we're going to want to sacrifice. We've been told that we don't have to sacrifice, that you guys are going to, things are going to run and we're going to be fine. And if that changes, people will start, paying more attention. But as long as people have the luxury of not needing to know what's going on and not caring what's going on, things aren't going to change. So if the material conditions change, people's behavior is going to change in response.
And they're going to. Can I add a little bit to that? Go, Carlo.
No, go ahead. No, I just wanted to add. So you're recommending Billy Bobby bring back the draft because that's where everybody learned about what was going on.
I don't think you need to. I think we are, each of us, that meaning Europe and the US, are heading for very dire economic straits. I mean, there was this Janet Yellen news that we ran like thousands of simulations and they all point to a debt crisis, like 88% of them or something along those lines. So that already is untenable. At the same time, Israel, through its actions, I think permanently lost Russia. They've lost China. Both of them have very strongly condemned this attack on the Iranian consulate, right? Russia is talking about, grain exchange for bricks. I don't know if you guys understand how serious that is. Like, that redraws the exchange of grain, of the stuff that it's like an oil. It's like OPEC for grain. If it were to happen, they're pushing this very, very strongly. It would make bricks completely fuel secure. And the West would be screwed. Pretty much locked out, or having to go along with whatever conditions they set for the grain, because they can just say that it goes from this seller to that seller. No speculation in between, and things are changing very, very fast. And the collective West, that 10% of the global population, is going to represent that much.
Hey, that's the international community, Ben.
That's
who matters.
Yes.
Well, by the end, I saw something on Zero Hedge a day or two ago that projections suggest that the American interest on the national debt, the interest payments, just the interest payments, will be 1.6 trillion
at the end of this year.
At the end of this year, yes. So, I mean, right. And basically we're running up, I think it's I want to say it's every 4 months, something like that. We run up
100 days.
Just about 100 days is what.
Yes. Yeah. Every 100 days, another $1 trillion of debt. It's amazing. I mean, I can remember when it was under 10 million. The total debt was under 10 billion. And 10 million was seen as like this absurdly high number.
People advocating that Obama just mint $1 trillion coin and pay it off.
Yes.
I don't know how that would affect things, but
back to hard power. I started following some military stuff. Defense One is a good one. It's very interesting because the US passed this budget just over 1 trillion, but like 800 billion went to the Pentagon. And like immediately in the week following, this isn't too long ago, there was this wish list from the Air Force, from Space Force, from the Navy. They all have these wish lists, and the Space Force had about $1 trillion worth of wish list, out of which 800 billion is classified. Like even that soft power, it seems someone's noticed shit. It's not just the bridges that are like 17,000 bridges in the conditions of collapsing from a single blow, but a lot of the stuff that we thought was capable and very good, we're in need of refreshment. We kind of fell asleep at the wheel. There's a lot of that going on. Now that's the hard power that backs up the soft
The
power.
artillery saga has been amazing.
Artillery saga?
Yeah, lack of artillery capacity in the US.
Oh, yeah. True. The Ukrainians are building decoys from like drain pipes or something like that. That's how few.
And even left. Ukraine claims it's 6-1, and that means it's probably 20-1. I mean, is my guess.
Well, I saw yesterday. It was this morning, maybe at the beginning of April. It said Shoigu said that as of the beginning
60,
of January, 70,000. Now it's 70,000.
Oh, yeah.
What I saw yesterday. Yes. So it's gone up. I mean, it's just, I think
70,000
since January. 70,000 Ukrainian losses killed and retrieved.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, that does suggest that the firepower ratio is just sliding further and further against Ukraine. And that's, I don't think the casualties were always that bad for them and that lopsided for them. But what's happened is the firepower shifts more in Russia's favor as they throw more fabs, more drones, more artillery. It's going to get increasing. It's just going to escalate from here.
Hence, in both places, you have a kind of a wave of terror. I think they struck deep into Russia. One was a refinery, but the other, as claimed by the local governor, was basically a workers' dormitory, but they say a drone factory, and they're doing this. Look, we can still do stuff. At the same time, and I want to point this out, this is amazing, blackmailing Biden and the U.S. administration. And this was this piece by David Ignatius, right? Well, like an interview with Zelensky. And he said, give us the weapons to stop the Russian attacks, or Ukraine will escalate its counterattacks on Russian airfields, energy facilities, and other strategic targets after the other. The officials in Washington said, we do not approve of these attacks on energy industry. A little bit of research went into this, but apparently the capacity to refine crude oil in Russia, about 14% was damaged, right? So they have about 4 million barrels per day. That's the full capacity of Russia. But the capacity to extract crude from the ground has not been touched at all. And guess who has 20 million barrels per day capacity to refine oil? China. I mean, all this does is bring more money into, as they like to say, the Kremlin's coffers. And they say, we'll strengthen Russia if the US doesn't pay us that, whatever, 60 billion, which I think is amazingly out of this world, bunker mentality that he now has.
Who was hypothesizing that just with 200 Phantoms and some ATACMS, Ukraine would have total victory?
The two idiots. It was a Russian expat and an American criminologist, like the big opinion piece in the Kiev Post, Le Grand.
So that wasn't Alinsky in the Ignatius interview. Okay.
No, it was the Americans trying to egg on Macron. That was the point of the entire article.
It's going to be interesting to see where that goes because right now, we've been speculating on that the cause of escalation. Is tailwind. How much dirt does Zelensky have on Biden? How much leverage does Biden have over Zelensky? And it might turn out that Ukraine will continue to try, like Israel did with the strike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus, that Ukraine is because they have no battlefield options left. They're just going to increase the terror campaign and hope that provokes a Russian reaction that justifies some sort of NATO intervention. That might be the only card they have left at this point.
Oh, true.
Besides directly attacking NATO themselves, which I think they're actually willing to do, but they haven't gotten to that bridge yet.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to terror, this is interesting that the Kiev Post, I think they were proud of this. There was this van with maybe 70 kilos of explosives that were hidden inside of icons, like religious objects, Orthodox religious objects, that went from Ukraine, like through Romania, Hungary, Poland, and the Baltic states, like 2 of them, to get back into Russia. And they were caught. And they said, yeah, Kiev sent those. This is amazing to me that they don't even deny it. They don't say it's the FSB claims or whatever. It's like, yeah, this is our policy now. And, the Crocus thing is beginning to unwind because Russia is very fast in the investigations. People in Turkey, some Tajiks in Tajikistan, as well as within Russia, a lot of people supplying the weapons, they've been arrested. And Russia asked to extradite the, not Budanov of the GUR, but the other one, the defense intelligence guy.
I can't remember his name, yes.
Me neither. But yeah, just because you already said that you did terrorism on Russia or you had a part in it. And that's, not designed for him to be extradited. That's designed for Ukraine to say no. And then we'll see what happens because they already said we are opening a probe into the US involvement in this. At this point, still rhetoric and a probe. I'd like to see where that goes.
So Ukraine and Russia have an extradition treaty? I mean,
no.
I didn't think so.
Yeah.
But so Russia's just saying send him or else there's going to be consequences for not doing it. And I don't think they're going to do it. And so, the question is, what exactly are the consequences going to be? That's a very interesting story to follow. And we can't wait until we get some results from the investigation.
We're going to get them.
who can imagine that it's not going to lead back to Ukraine and the West? Like, I mean, to me, I'm, 100% certain it will, but we'll say 99.99%.
I think this does validate because people were debating, myself included, were debating, how disposable were those 4 shooters, and I think it's becoming clear that the intent
they were supposed to die, right?
No, the intent was for them to escape because once those 4 guys were cut, they really unraveled. I don't think anyone intended for the whole organization to get unraveled like that. The intent was for there to be a clean escape, and they could continue. The network could continue doing terrorist attacks. I don't think it was anticipated that there'd be these mass arrests that it would get unraveled that quickly. I think it wasn't intended to be disposable.
They certainly weren't supposed to get caught. Is that Spaz?
No. Yes.
Cool.
I think if they'd made it to Ukraine, they would have been dead. They would have been eliminated.
Yeah. I agree. They thought they would be greeted as heroes, but I think they would have been.
No, they would have killed them. Buried them somewhere, buried them underneath already dead Ukrainians or something.
I think so too.
Well, I saw a video from a Georgian POW on the Ukrainian side who was captured, and he was injured. He wasn't in very good condition, but he basically said that when they got pinned down, they couldn't escape. They radioed, command their situation. They had wounded, they were pinned down, and then they claimed the Ukrainian side was actually what was sheltering them to prevent them from being captured. And there's just more and more stories coming out like that they would rather you be dead than captured. So it's stories to be taken with a grain of salt, but we're seeing more of them. So it's
further similarities.
With Israel.
I was going to say it sounds like they have a. Is that the Hannibal documentary?
Yeah, Hannibal.
It looks like they have their own.
Yes.
What a time to be alive.
Well, I'm above age, but I'm not going to volunteer for the Ukrainian army. I know I fit within their framework, but
yeah, I think you are of conscription age there.
Yeah.
Things are not looking good on the front for Ukraine. We've been talking about it for a while. When is the front going to collapse? And we're getting closer and closer by all accounts, but who knows? And Ian, do you still stand by your
that they would drag it past the U.S. presidential election? Yes, I still stand by that. I don't see an imminent collapse.
I can just hear Biden on the phone with Alinsky. Just hold on a few more months, and then we'll figure it out. Yeah, everything's just political. It's so cynical.
Except for the physical. I stand by my words. They're going to try to extend it to November. I don't think they're going to succeed. But, this is for us to see this year, I think.
So Russia is getting more aggressive bombing their energy, not just the substations, but the actual power generation. And Kharkov apparently is completely
there's
and they're just doing a mass exodus from the city because it's just...
Yeah, I saw that too. Like all
Kharkov is a major industrial, a major center for their military industrial complex. So if they just rinse and repeat with each city, that's going to become...
And they keep knocking out the electricity. You can't run a factory without electricity.
Or flush your toilet. It's just... So you have to leave the city,
Well, it shows how Russia has been prosecuting this special military operation. They've really kept the gloves on, and they can, they're doing a measuring campaign of slowly removing the gloves, especially in response to these provocations, like that terrorist attack.
So in response, what do the European vassals about to be discarded do, who are dealing with economic troubles, what they call rough sleeping, as in homelessness crisis, all of that? They send Ana Hidalgo, which I could have sworn is a fucking Spanish name, like I heard it from the conquistadors, but she's the mayor of Paris, all the way to Kiev to say, well, the Russians and the Belarusians are not going to be welcome at the Olympics. That'll solve it. That'll solve the battlefield problems, I think. If they use the Olympics for political gain, and what you mentioned before the show, Billy Bob, was this new... Vovan and Lexus are worth an entire wing of the KGB, what they're doing. They got the Olympic head, German name, I'm blanking on it now, but on a show. Got him to admit that, yes, we have this committee, and we also ask Ukrainians to kind of track what Russian athletes say on the internet if they're a bit patriotic, so we can find, reasons for them not to compete. And Maria Zakharova, the Empress, has already responded saying you're caught in some pretty corrupt, pretty criminal shit. But yeah, that'll solve everything. So then we'll have the BRICS friendship games, and after a while.
You want me to read the direct quote?
Which one?
That those two guys got this guy to say with their prank call.
Go for it.
Well, okay, so here's the direct quote. This is the leader of the Olympic Committee or whatever. So now those who support the Russian government cannot participate in the Olympic Games. We have a special monitoring commission at the IOC level that works with an independent company. They monitor the internet, media, and public statements. So if an athlete appears somewhere with such statements, they cannot participate in the games. We also offered the Ukraine side, not only offered, but also asked them to provide us with information about the behavior of such athletes and officials. In that case, they will not be able to participate in the games. Like, that's a total politicalization of the Olympics. And it just, we need a new Olympics. We need a new world order.
A new world court, a new UN, all of that. Zakharova, these are the two responses, one to France, the other to this guy is called Thomas Bach, obviously a German, of course it is. And Zakharova warned that the mayor of Paris, that goods from France may not be welcome in Russia, and they don't need anything from France. So that's not just a lightly said threat. They can absolutely boycott the whole thing. And the IOC has entered a criminal conspiracy to disqualify competitive athletes. That's also Zakharova. And criminal conspiracy are, in diplomacy, that means something. That means something that's persecutable.
Well, we have an example of that in American history. It was called the Negro Leagues, when African Americans weren't invited into the major leagues, and the legacy of that is that all the records prior to I would say beyond Jackie Robinson and Larry Doby, but beyond that, the few years beyond that, when you really had a fair number, or at least a representative number of African Americans in the big leagues, those records mean nothing. Those records mean nothing. The fact that Ruth hit a bunch of home runs off Ethel Rixey, who didn't belong in the major leagues in any way, shape, or form, it's a scandal that America should never get over, no matter how much they pay homage to those people, to the African Americans that were shut out of the major leagues.
Also, American Jim Crow.
Yeah,
you could say American Jim Crow and phrenology were a big influence on Nazi Germany.
Phrenology,
right? Exactly.
Yeah, the phrenology is the study of the skull, right? That whole
the alleged racial.
Yeah, well, Hitler was just shocked that that black guy did so good in the 1933 Olympics.
Jesse Owens, yeah.
I'm astonished by the fact that after everything we've seen, I haven't even heard of a complaint against Israeli athletes. I haven't read of anything like that. Nothing.
Oh.
Well, I think
every once in a while I hear about a club that refuses to play the Israeli team.
That happens.
Some Irish clubs. Every now and then you hear about it, but that's about it. Ian, I'm sorry.
I think it kind of proves that the outrage crowds, the people that put the French flag or the Ukrainian flag or whatever flag in their social media profiles, are very much trained. What was that experiment called? Pavlov's dogs. Is that what I'm thinking?
The salivating reflex. When
the salivating reflex. It really proves how many of these
Russian
people
scientists, by the way,
do not think for themselves. They respond to external stimuli, and the external stimuli says, "Oh, there's this bad Paris attack. You need to be upset about this. There's this bad other attack. There's this bad invasion," and they respond to that. Not to say those individual events are necessarily illegitimate or not tragic, or you shouldn't be upset about it, but these people only respond to the external stimuli. They don't think for themselves and say, "Oh, I saw in the news this terrorist attack happened. I should be upset about this. I should put the Russian flag in my Bible." They don't think like that. They respond to the central direction.
Yeah. And can you imagine the state of hysteria you have to be in to be like that? to respond to everything like Pavlov's dog. I mean, I'm just trying to imagine.
Again, we're going back to our soft power discussion. It's
Mhm.
it's amazing. It is amazingly successful.
So what's the answer to countering it? Anybody?
Well, again, when the material conditions change, when people
Carlo,
are starting to ask this, when they don't have the luxury of not needing to know.
Carlo, it's been, I think, a year and a half since, reality is my answer, a year and a half since Miss Ursula had said the infamous, the Russian economy is in tatters. They are using chips from washing machines. And now for about a week, every day, Ukraine is being bombarded, not just by the big fab boys, but also Kinjals, the Zircon, much more advanced hypersonic missile. They're hunting, for Patriot systems. Reality, I think, is when these bubbles burst, and there's going to be pain. There is psychological pain assigned to when the bubbles burst.
I think there is a risk of escalation because here's the problem. I don't think the Russians are going to try and take Odessa. I think the idea is still the same as at the beginning. I mean, they took more territory than they originally intended, because originally the plan was just for Donetsk and Luhansk to get autonomous status, not even leave Ukraine, but now they have these 4 additional territories. I think still the intent is the same, having a neutral government in Ukraine, a demilitarized Ukraine, a denazified Ukraine. I think the problem...
Certainly no terrorist attacks. That's not acceptable anymore. So despite what Medvedev says, that's just not... I think that's unacceptable to Russia.
The problem is that when this war is over and Zelensky is either dead or in Miami or Italy, there's not going to be any motivation to keep the casualties secret. It's not going to be any motivation to keep secrecy about what happened in the war. And I think if it comes out, there's 500,000 dead or something like that. It's really going to show what a paper tiger, excuse me, our Wunderwaffen is. I just don't know if NATO is going to be able to just walk away from what's going to be a very clear defeat with the Russian
I hope not.
military-industrial complex. Because if they walk away from it as just a permanent embarrassment that they've been fantasizing about since 1947 when the Cold War started. I mean, it's just going to be this big showdown. We would just kick their asses, just like in a Tom Clancy book. And then it just turned, or Desert Storm is going to be just like, fighting Russia would be just like fighting Saddam Hussein, exactly the same. And when it actually happens, it's just a humiliating failure like this. I don't know if they're going to be able to psychologically handle that and not try to escalate it.
Yeah, I hope not. I mean, one thing is telling on the Russian side that pretty much every day now they bring up Yugoslavia and pin it around NATO's neck at the UN. So if they didn't feel confident in their weapons and in their diplomacy and their friends, allies, I don't think they'd do that. I think they're the wind is at their back, as they say.
I think the danger of escalation is very high for exactly the reason Ian says. Like they're not ready to, they're not prepared to take the L. They're gonna have to. And again, I mean, China, like they want a war with China. They want to use Taiwan like Ukraine. So no, I mean this entertainment. I mean, and it's a disgusting term, entertainment. I mean, it's stimulating mentally for me to watch what's going on and then to see the masses of people just not even knowing what the fuck is going on. And I think, it's, I feel like it's our job to do what we can to wake people up. And so that's kind of one of the reasons we have this program, but they're not prepared to take the L. It's gonna, we're gonna have more escalation and things are gonna get a lot more precarious than they currently are, with the ultimate demise. Like there's no win. There's no military route. There's no diplomatic route. There's no economic route for the West to triumph. Their decline is inevitable. And the question is, how far are they going to drag humanity down in the process? Mm-hmm. And that's what's interesting to me. Like we will find out within the next 10 years, maybe sooner, maybe the next 10 days. We'll see. Last words, guys. Thank you for the discussion. Thank you for the viewers. We've had a solid number of a high amount of live viewers. I'm not going to name numbers because they're low, but for our program, they're good. So thank you everybody for watching and sticking with us. Any last comments? Gentlemen?
I'd like to read a short thing. This is about, I'm a week late reading this article. It was on my reading list, but this is not from Stephen Bryan, who is one of the interesting voices on Asia Times. This is from David P. Goldman. And this guy has realized, who's usually a strategist, defense specialist, what China is. And he said, if China, is automated plants to make, it can create 1,000 cruise missiles a day. Not impossible given the manufacture of 1,000 EVs a day. And the implication that China can produce the equivalent of America's inventory of 4,000 cruise missiles in a week, while American defense contractors take years to assemble them by hand. That's the fight you're picking if you're actually stupid enough to go into China.
Thanks for proving my hypothesis of the inevitability of Western defeat. I mean, there's just there's no way. Thank you for that, Ben.
Thank you, and thanks, Paulie, Gregor, the regulars. Thanks everyone for watching.
Yes, thanks, Greg. Thanks for coming on.
Okay, we'll be back on Friday, same time as noon Eastern time for episode 68 of the Blowback Roundtable. Thank you very much, guys.